How do you do there? 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 Okay, I'm hoping this video is not terrifying as all hell, but we do need to. But I do need to talk about something that is scary as all hell. Alzheimer's, and while we're at it, Down syndrome. No, just a minute, just a minute. I didn't say Down syndrome was frightening. There's a, there is, however, a terrifying link with Down syndrome, and it is Alzheimer's. Believe it or not. I know. Now, and for anybody new coming, and for anybody new in the channel, this channel here, I don't want to come across as so frightening that no one can watch this. All right, that's not what I'm here for. Just to scar people. But you know, uh, the elephant in the closet does need to be expressed. Of my thoughts about this, uh, versus people from here on, versus anybody watching this and beyond. You know, I'm talking directly to you. And I want to shed light on a, you know, on both Down syndrome and Alzheimer's. And I want to give a perspective, a dark perspective with a whole lot of light on it. Now, Down syndrome is a wonderful thing, and I'm not saying it isn't. Alzheimer's, by the way, is a direct link to Down syndrome, and that part of it is very scary, and is more tied with people who have Down syndrome. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong here. I think it's great. I think that people would understand this, uh, that uh, that with people with Down syndrome, not necessarily myself, but like people with Down syndrome are are not immune to Alzheimer's or anything like that. In fact, that's one of the many things that makes, you know, individuals with Down syndrome more vulnerable. They're a very vulnerable bunch, not because they're vulnerable, but because Down syndrome makes them vulnerable. You know, there's there is a difference between vulnerability and the way another person looks at another person. You know, like there's there is such a thing as not really understanding a person, and judging them before they almost and judging them before they even get close to knowing who you know. Like it's not so much that, like, I'll put it to you this way, okay? To ease the tension already that I may have installed in some people. Since Down syndrome is a syndrome, and the person that has the syndrome are two different things entirely. You know, the syndrome and the person doesn't necessarily match with you. And for an example, myself, Down syndrome, Down syndrome and me don't necessarily match. Okay, I have it, yes, but it doesn't really, but it doesn't necessarily match with me because I'm because I just naturally um, am more verbal with people that don't have Down syndrome, and you know that's not the problem with me. The problem with me is that I have to walk away from not people who have Down syndrome, but from the syndrome itself. I have to walk away from it because that's not really where I belong. You know, the syndrome itself is not by any chance like people who have Down syndrome are not indifferent, but however the syndrome is the syndrome. You know the mask, if you want to call it that, the or the mask, the the this the mask or or the exceptional, you know, or the like either the mask or um, either the mask, uh, either the mask, you know, or either the mask or the e- either the mask, uh, sorry, either, either the mask or uh, the the um, either the mask, sorry, either either the mask or or the exception. You know, like I people have different ways to go about themselves and carry themselves, and you know the syndrome is like the syndrome itself is not a person. It's a syndrome, and it's tied to a lot of different things. And the people that are lucky to have Down syndrome uh, get their own side of the struggles, get their own side of struggle, get their own uh, you know, their own version of struggles, their own version of everything, uh, their own version of Alzheimer's, their own version of being developmentally challenged. Wow, I stepped into my shot. Um, their their own um, their own version of challenges. Some, some might be greater than others. And other challenges are more of a developmental, uh, you know, umbrella over them. there's nothing like I mean, there's nothing really wrong with it. It's just that other than the Pope, a lot of people carry themselves like a lot of people carry themselves um, in different ways. Like like a lot of different people carry themselves in ways that you know, and and a lot of ways they carry themselves in um, very different ways. Like uh, they can't carry, they can carry their own weight, you know, in whatever this. Uh, uh, People can carry themselves in a Down syndrome, you know, uh, in a Down syndrome way, you know, where the syndrome is not defined. You know, the person is who's in, the person is it's the person that is important, not necessarily the syndrome. And just that alone has a challenge trying to read people through a trying to see trying to trying to find a way to reach out to people and keep their syndrome and keep exterior and keep the Down syndrome exterior at bay, right? Very smart people to not want to talk about having Down syndrome because maybe their version of Down syndrome, um, from a person with Down syndrome's view could be a lot more challenging. A lot more physical, a lot more mentally and physically inquired. You know, like you have to be, like you have to kind of show up, like you have to kind of show how you carry yourself. Um, you have to show, you have to show yourself in a way that doesn't include being in the closet, uh, being in some box that potentially uh, you have been thrown into, or you've had no choice. You had to walk into it. Now, it, Alzheimer's, the people who have it are that usually, you know, usually people with Down syndrome um, are in more fear of getting Alzheimer's it because Alzheimer's heavier, actually hits more people with Down syndrome than it does a person without Down syndrome. You know, like and do, and I don't particularly like that idea. The Pope that people have to run and hide. Especially the people who are way more vulnerable for Alzheimer's to even handle. And we and we're talking people who have Down syndrome or cerebral palsy or something like that. Like I mean, we're talking people who not only are more vulnerable to getting Alzheimer's or having Alzheimer's, we're talking uh, people that are that show way more weakness toward that, and so they're terrified. They're terrified of, and viewer, you know, if anyone doesn't like, Alzheimer's and Down syndrome are two different things, and when the both of them bang into each other, like, I mean, wow, like, it's almost like there's a great divide between the two things, and when they come crashing into each other, that's an eternal nightmare. You know, that's an eternal nightmare. Somebody who has, someone who doesn't have Down syndrome, they don't, they don't have that same eternal nightmare. They have a different, they have something entirely different, where they're unaware that it's people with Down syndrome that Alzheimer's goes after more, and 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 the terror and the actual terror that has is that, people with Down syndrome are way the hell more vulnerable, and people who have Down and people who don't have Down syndrome, they don't have that fear. They do. They don't have that fear, and they don't have that awareness that, you know it's more centered and has a direct link with Down syndrome, because, like, if you thought like if you thought for 1 minute that Down syndrome was challenging, which it is, you know, imagine having Alzheimer's on top of that. You know, like, it's for sure a nightmare, and I'm sure a lot of people in front of me, beside me, behind me would be agreeing. That would definitely be agreeing. This, and it's just rightly so. Like, I did not write the book in how Down syndrome and Alzheimer's are linked. I did not write that book. However, whoever had wrote that book, they better change their way of writing, because that is not cool. The, the, they better change their way of writing. Whoever wrote that book, they had better change the way they write, because nobody wants to read something about their vulnerability when they don't even know how to handle a situation like that. The last thing they want is to be reading something on a vulnerability that the first thing, like the last thing people who have Alzheimer's and Down syndrome together want to read is a book based on a vulnerability that they had. So can you tell me where that makes sense? It, like I'm just saying, like, it takes one to bend over and fart, and it takes two to tango. So, like, it takes one to bend over, and like, it takes one to blow their nose after they sneezed. It takes two to tango. You know, yourself and a partner. So just letting you know, just letting you know that what you read, uh, just letting you know that what you think you know about Alzheimer's and Down syndrome, it's not a lie. It is not a lie. It is not a lie. It is linked. Alzheimer's and Down syndrome are linked together. So that's not a lie. It's very real. And there's something nobody, and that is for sure a combination package that nobody wants. No matter how goofy it sounds, uh, nobody wants that. It bet like like it it's challenging enough just to have Down syndrome. It's and to like it is challenging enough to have Down syndrome, you know, which is pretty damn challenging. Down syndrome and Alzheimer's together, you got a terrific nightmare. Okay? You got a terrific nightmare because you got two things that you got to worry about. You know? Like, it, like, like, I mean, you could take my word for it, which would be a healthier alternative, or you could get it from someone that doesn't know that Down syndrome and Alzheimer's is linked. You could get it from someone who doesn't know that Down syndrome and Alzheimer's is linked, or you could get it from over here, you know, that has a more like m- more subtle, yet still getting the point across that hey, you know, stuff like this does actually stuff like this does matter, and it needs to be and it needs to be addressed. You know, the the Alzheimer's Down syndrome elephant needs to be addressed, and it doesn't need to be addressed like the next McDonald's Happy Meal, but but you got to realize that you know what are we doing? Like we thought we knew what Down syndrome was. We thought we knew what Alzheimer's was. That's fine if you thought you knew that. It's it's totally fine if you thought you knew that. But you know, the truth is the truth. You know, and I couldn't rewrite that, and I did not write that truth. I'm only abiding by it. You know, I did not write that truth. I did not write that kind of truth. I'm abiding by it, yes, but I didn't write it. Like I did not write that truth. I'm having to abide by it. But at the end of the day, I can only worry about having Down syndrome, you know? And it's not that I'm, you know, but at the end of the day, I've got one thing, one challenge, an extra chromosome. That's all I need, you know? And I'm not, and, you know, the last thing I need is Alzheimer's on top of that, you know? Making it like it was the worst thing since the bombing of you know, the thinking of uh, Bill Harbor, you know, and believe me, I would rather uh, be swimming, and believe me when I say this, I do not, I, I'd rather be swimming in an ocean that has every sea monster down there than to, you know, be caught unaware that that Down syndrome is without challenges. Okay? Like, I'm going to think about it for a minute. Down syndrome has more challenges than a simple, Down syndrome has more challenges than 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 a than you know Down syndrome has more challenges, and half of those challenges are developmental. Now you got Alzheimer's on top of that, and it's like, huh? I gotta worry about having an open and closed doors. I, I gotta worry about having even more doors that are opening and closing in my head. Like Down syndrome has that. Doors opening up, doors closing, doors scaring the crap out of you. Like 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 Alzheimer's would sound like a peaceful thing by comparison. It's the same darn thing. But I don't want to. But yeah. And I realize this is a very dark episode in here. That's why I'm here to talk about it. Because there is a dark passage, a link that I'm pretty sure, um, nobody wants to really hear this stuff coming out of me. But if you don't talk about certain things that are dark, then they don't really have a YouTube channel, and you're gonna be able to balance that out. So anyway, having said that, done that, and got the hat and the coat and the house jacket, and having said that and done that and been there and got the bowling trophy of it, um, yeah, like so. You can let me know how this thing went, and if you like it, and even if you didn't like it, and you're just kind of watching it from like, you know, the review mirror of the kitchen. You can let me know how this went. You can let me know how this went in the comments, or you can ignore the comments and just go, like, okay, he said his thing, and you know, come here no water, like just. But anyway, I hope some people like this thing, and if some folks are finding this way too dark, um, uh, that's fine too. That's fine too. There's a lot of stuff on this channel that isn't as dark, so you can be happy. So you can be happy for that. So you can be happy about that. But but for some folks that are into this kind of dark stuff, um, thank you for supporting this channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.